Kia ora and welcome to another episode of the Niche Cast, and today we're going to be talking all about the Super Smash and Aotearoa T20 cricketing matters. The Super Smash has another 6 or 7 games before finals, and then obviously after that we've got a Blackcaps T20 series against Australia. Although the quick and interesting thing about that, Australia is also sending their test team to South Africa at the same time, so it's not exactly like a super duper Australian team. It's just their T20 players who weren't playing test cricket, so just keep that in mind. But yes, we are here to discuss all things Aotearoa T20 cricket with the Wobbly Wildcard. We do the Niche Case Variety Show early in the week, so make sure you subscribe to however you get your podcasts, because you're getting 2 Kiwi sports podcasts a week. We do our email coming in Mondays and Fridays, just writing about various different Kiwi sports business, whatever tickles our fancy, and we're always writing about sport at the niche-case.com. If you appreciate our work, jump on Patreon and support us straight up the guts. Patreon is the best way to support us with the mahi that we are doing. And whether it's Flying Kiwis football, whether it's Kiwis in the NRL, whether it's Kiwis in the Australian National Basketball League, whether it's Stephen Adams, however you want it. Maybe it's the UFC, maybe it's Lydia Ko, maybe it's football within Aotearoa, maybe it's cricket within Aotearoa, however you want it, whatever you want. We are here to service Aotearoa as the greatest sporting nation in the world. Wobbly Wildcard, what is cracking?
What is cracking? The bloody temperature on the thermometers at the moment. I think probably won't be one of them 2-hour marathon podcasts today, because I might expire of heat exhaustion before that point.
Well, I would hate to see you in a sauna if you die of heat exhaustion before, just from natural temperatures. Jeepers creepers.
Yeah, I can do the sauna because you're you're ready for it. You know what I mean? It's a different task when it creeps up on you while you're doing something else.
Well, you live up in the naughty north of Aotearoa in the summertime, so I don't know what the fuck you're expecting. Wellington cricket.
Oh, I expect exactly this. This is it.
Yeah, so you're prepared for it. You're there for it. You know it's coming.
I am prepared for it. I'm just,
The sun doesn't creep up to you in mid-January, but nonetheless. Start our Super Smash discussion here, Wildcard. We have to talk about Wellington cricket. That means Wellington Firebirds, and it means Wellington Blaze, and it also means just the wider Wellington cricket organisation and the wider Wellington cricket community, because they're doing pretty damn impressive things down in Wellington, starting with having both teams at the top of the table in the Super Smash, and they are trying to go back to back with the Super Smash double. So last year their men's and women's teams won the Super Smash, and this is a period of time where the Wellington Firebirds have won 3 Super Smash titles, and the Wellington Blaze have won 4 titles since the 2014-15 Super Smash season. Like, as I wrote when I was writing about this yesterday, let's just push aside Plunkett Shield cricket, Ford Trophy cricket, and Halliburton Johnston Shield cricket, which is women's 50-over cricket in Aotearoa, because the Super Smash is the most visible thing, and it's a bit of a stage for these cricket associations, these organisations, to put their best foot forward as far as performances on the field and establishing an entertaining product. And I'm fascinated by Wellington cricket because there's quite clearly a culture element to it. They've established a winning culture and also an organizational culture that is just, like, you can feel it. You can see it when you're watching Wellington play cricket, and I'm fascinated by culture, whether it's the All Blacks culture, whether it's, I've talked about City Kickboxing's culture. I'm fascinated by team culture, sports culture, how to set it up, how to establish it, and I've seen these good signs with Wellington cricket as well. So we'll touch on some players, I think, throughout this podcast and this episode, like key players, key performers, stuff like that. But what I pose to you, Wildcard, is when you sit down and you catch one of the Wellington back-to-back games. They've had a lot of games broadcasted. I think I sussed out that they had more games broadcasted on either Spark Sport or Duke than the other teams in either competition. But to be fair, though, the games that aren't broadcasted by Duke or Spark Sport, they can be streamed on YouTube. So they're all kind of broadcasted, but as far as like TV games go or Spark Sport games go, Wellington gets the most, which is, again, going back to visibility, it puts them in the box seat, but you earn that, I reckon. You earn that by winning and putting on a fantastic product. So when you tune in to watch Wellington play, like what are some of the things you notice or feelings that arise within you about Wellington cricket as an organisation and how they've gone about building a culture, winning cricket games, and laying it all out in a atmosphere that just like, to me it's all tangible. To me it's good team culture manifested in everything you see when you watch a Wellington cricket game. But I'm intrigued as to what you think about that.
Yeah, I can't say I've really thought about that in isolation. It's more sort of like when I chuck on a thing, it's whatever is on is the one that I watch. And I don't necessarily think Wellington's on today, so I'm going to watch that. But I think there is something to that. Like, I don't know. I think Wellington is watching first of all, the first thing you get from watching either of the Wellington teams, and often not always, but often the women's game is on first, which means an opportunity, as of the last few games anyway, to watch Sophie Devine, who's just like 3 steps ahead of anyone else in that competition. And that, like, I was in preparation for this because we're talking about Super Smash. I grabbed the Super Smash website up and they got a little stats thing, which is kind of interesting because they list all the stats, but they have like the male and the female leader and then the second place, third place, etc. So it's a little bit confusing to look at. But as far as sixes hit, like Sophie Devine's hit 14 of them. Jess Watkins is next with 4. So like it's just it's night and day. But it goes beyond that as well. Like you can say similar things about watching the Firebirds men play, like watching Devon Conway since he's like when he's there and available, and Finn Allen's had this incredible breakout thing, and Logan Van Beek taking that catch or whatever. I don't know what it is specifically beyond that, but there is something about, like, they do seem to be the good vibes team of the Super Smash, and that's kind of cool just for Wellington sport in general, because I think you get similar feelings maybe about, like, the way the Phoenix is supported in the A-League. I like, there's something about the Phoenix fans and the Yellow Fever and then the wider, Phoenix supporter groups. It's like there's a deep, deep passion, but it's also nobody's a dick about it kind of thing. There's something that's slightly more laid back and casual about it, which is really refreshing actually in the way sports are followed. And I think you get in, particularly in rugby, you get a very heavy kind of like Canterbury versus Auckland thing often, and Canterburyans will always be like, yeah, well, the All Blacks are at their best when Canterbury's at their best, and Aucklanders will be like, well, the All Blacks are at their best when Auckland's at their best, and these kind of weird rivalries which I've never been able to really click into. Wellington's sort of outside that, and I guess maybe that's part of this, but then also you chuck in like the Basin Reserve is the nicest cricket ground in the country. That's a big factor as well, and I don't know, they do seem like I can't speak from outside looking in, but it does seem like they're certainly onto something with all the success that's been around, and yeah, like recruitment and player development and things like that are a big part of that. But also they just do seem to be like the good vibes team, and that comes, I suppose, with being really good at what you do, winning a lot of cricket games, and everyone pretty much being happy about that. I don't know.
That's fair, but you don't just like it's one thing to stumble across being a good vibes thing, and it's another thing to build out a actual organizational culture that is across the men's and women's teams together. They're always in unison. They're presented in unison. They present themselves as one team, one organization. Little things like the Logan Van Bank initiative that they started, and just the work they do in the community as well. I think it's similar to like what you're saying about the Wellington as a sports region. I think Wellingtonians love their sport, and you see that with how the Basin Reserve is presented in a Blackcaps test, and you mentioned the Wellington Phoenix and stuff like that. There's a hearty sporting community in Wellington. Also, a lot of NRL players come from Wellington these days as well. But the things you mentioned there are like the Basin Reserves there. Fantastic. But that's only relevant if you make the most of it. So if you use the Basin Reserve dimensions and pitch to your advantage to win cricket games, if you use the Basin Reserve as a community hub for Wellington cricket, little things like the Logan Van Bank or just stuff like that to bring people to the Basin Reserve. So it's like you have these things where Wellington's a hearty sports community. They love their Wellingtonian sport. But as an organization, you have to tap into that. Yes, you've got the Basin Reserve there. But as an organization, you have to tap into that. Yes, you have Devon Conway and Sophie Devine, or insert any other gun T20 player. But that doesn't give you a winning team culture. That gives you a couple superstar players. And what Wellington have done is build out across the board a really intense, tangible culture that's what I was kind of alluding to. When I watch the Wellington teams play cricket, I know I am watching an organization that is at its peak. Because I'm watching the messaging from the players is all in alignment. I'm watching excellence on the field. I'm watching a community that is celebrating and connected to their team. I'm watching tactics. I'm watching strategy at its finest as well. And it's all, like, to me, it smacks you in the face. Whenever I catch a Wellington game, men or women, maybe both, I know that I am watching just an organization at its peak. And it's like, to me, it's really tangible. That's what I feel. Like, it's far more than just watching a good player in good form or watching New Zealand's premier cricket ground on display. There is an organization that has brought all of that together, and what I see and what I feel is the end product. And I think it's just an interesting case study of organizational culture, because you do get like, oh, that's a team culture, but it's across two different teams, men's and women's, which is pretty fascinating. And it's also organizational because they do a lot of community work. There's a lot of the next layer to this that we'll move into is the players who have gone to Wellington, because they do have Sophie Devine, they do have the Kerr sisters, Amelia Kerr, Jess Kerr, they do have Tamsin Newton with the Blaze as well. On the men's side, you've got Devon Conway. You also have Ben Sears as a fantastic young player coming through. You've got Hamish Bennett's not actually one, but you've got a variety of... Devon Conway came from South Africa to Wellington, and he came up through Wellington. Like, they've got that aspect sorted. Jimmy Neesham came from Otago. Michael Bracewell came from Otago. Maddie Green made her White Ferns debut in 2014 while playing for Auckland. Then she went down to Wellington. Lee Kasprick moved from Otago to Wellington. And that's Logan Van Beek moved from Canterbury to Wellington. That's just as much as developing their own players. Hamish Bennett came from Canterbury as well. Just as much as developing players from Wellington and promoting them. Because you've got Rachin Ravindra. You've got Jess McFadden's a young player coming through Wellington. Zara Jetley is with the woman as well. Like, they've got that sussed, which again, this is an example of fantastic culture and organizational culture when you can develop your own players But the other aspect is Wellington is a beacon or a bastion of New Zealand cricket because established players from other regions are coming to Wellington. Like, Hamish Bennett was a veteran with Canterbury. He wasn't a fringe player with Canterbury, and he came to Wellington. Matty Green and Lee Kasparek were playing for New Zealand, then they came to Wellington. Like, these aren't young players looking for a game time. These are established performers who, for whatever reason, want to go to Wellington. And that holds incredible value as well. And that's another key sign of an amazing sports team or sports organization culture.
Yeah, and the most important aspect of that as well, and it's hard to say whether like the culture leads to this or this leads to the culture, because really it's both. I think you sort of get like a flow going in both directions. Like the culture is improved by the just sheer success that the amount of like games of cricket that have been won by Wellington teams over the last couple seasons. Like that boosts the culture as well. That makes it easier to recruit players. But then also they recruited a lot of like most of these people before that, and you have to have these things in place in order to be successful in the first place. So it's kind of a like it's always an interesting thing because it's using that like metaphor of organic culture as well that we've used a couple times before. Like it's not something that stays still. It's not something like you get to the point, sweet as it's done. Now we focus on other things. Like it's a constantly evolving. I was going to say mechanism, but that's too technical. Organism, that kind of thing. And I don't know. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about some of the like the recruitment side of things outside a couple of the main ones. Like Finn Allen gets talked about a lot at the moment because he fits into this sort of wider Kiwi sports theme of people leaving Auckland to like become better sports people elsewhere. And I think it's a bit overblown. Like, it's the same thing as people say about the New Zealand Warriors and the players that they miss out. And it's like, yeah, but what about the ones they kept? You know, you can't fit everyone into a squad. And some people would not have become the players they have become staying in Auckland. Some people needed to leave their comfort zones to get better and challenge themselves, all these kind of little factors. But obviously not really the case with the women's side. But when you look at some of the key players they've got, who they recruited from elsewhere, for the Firebird side, like Hamish Bennett was an established black cap and then he wasn't, you know, and Michael Bracewell is not quite of that level. Finn Allen is too young. Devon Conway wasn't eligible when he first came over. Like, you get this, because I say this because there has been this trend of black caps in recent years. You know, everyone's moving to like Tauranga and playing for Northern Districts, you know, but that Wellington have had like immense success. So we're talking about Super Smash here, but they also, you know, were defending champs of the Plunkett Shield as well. It's this is cross format. Devon Conway was the leading run scorer in every format last year. Can't remember who won the Ford Trophy last season. It might well have been Wellington. You'd know better than I don't have a memory for those kind of things, but it's that thing where like they didn't just sign players who were sort of like you remember when Kane Williamson played for Northern like last week? You remember last week when that happened, and they were saying it's the first time he's played a Super Smash game for like 5 or 6 years or something like that. A lot of those Black Caps guys don't play other than sporadically for Northern Districts, and so people talk about this Northern District squad, look how stacked it is, but that's really like a surface level kind of basic impression of them. The deeper cricket minds will look at that and say, yeah, but do they have the second tier players who can actually win them games in these competitions, the guys who are actually going to be there? And yeah, they do actually have some extremely good players in those roles, but like Wellington are stacked with those kind of guys who are going to be there over and over doing great things for them. And that is actually how you win. And that's also how I think that goes back into setting the culture, because these are the people that are there all the time and setting those standards and holding the rest of the team to account. Like, they have black caps that come in and out, but they also have a real stable and largely like a lot of experienced players in this role to mix with some of the younger guys. You know, it's a really nice balance, and I think all those kind of things go into this great big melting pot, don't they?
They do. So the opposite of the example you use with Northern Districts is the Otago Volts, because I've noted
Yes.
some really smart recruitment moves from the Otago Volts, and this isn't to be positive or negative. It's just different ways and different scenarios, different circumstances that teams find themselves in. And you look at Otago Volts, the Nick Kelly, Dale Phillips, Mitch Renwick, like those type of characters who were Dean Foxcroft, who hasn't actually played this summer. They were younger players who, to play the amount of cricket they wanted to play, had to move to a different province where there was opportunities for game time. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got Northern Districts. Wellington are somewhere in the middle. And that's really important because that's what wins you games, to the point that you said. But also, if you have too many of those younger players looking for opportunities, you're going to... This isn't the case with the Otago Volts, but it's something that may be holding them back, but they're not my example in this instance, because I look at the table and the ladder here, wildcard, and you've got the Otago women, who are locked in last place. They're on 8 points with the CD woman. And then you look at the men's competition, and Auckland are in last place. They're 1-6 from their 7 games. You think Auckland, you think Lockie Ferguson, Kyle Jamieson, Martin Guptill, Glenn Phillips, Mark Chapman. How the fuck are they last? But they have had to rely on younger, not super young, but just like younger domestic troopers. The likes of Sean Solier, Ben Horn, the O'Donnell brothers. A lot of their bowling attackers quite inexperienced. Ben Listers and so on. Ollie Pringle's played a few games. Lewis Delport has come in as a spinner. Like Lewis Delport, Will Somerville, not Glenn Phillips, but like Ben. Like they've all played a lot of cricket, but they're just solid domestic players. And then I look at the Otago team, especially in the women's competition. Basically, they roll out a bowling attack that is all like 24 years or younger. Otago and Northern Districts, I think, had 3 players in their Super Smash group who were selected in the New Zealand Under-19 women's squad. And it's an interesting dynamic I've noticed in the Super Smash, because if we're talking about Wellington, they're the big dogs. Canterbury are pretty solid in both men's and women's. Auckland women are, one of the better teams in that competition. And in the men's competition, you've got Wellington, CD, Canterbury, as I said, Northern Districts have their big dogs when they're available. If you are operating at that slightly lower talent point, fair play to Otago Sparks, like they're building out. I can see some really good things in their future just with the young talent they have coming through. But if you put a young bowling attack against the Wellington Blaze batting lineup, it's not going to end well for those Otago Sparks bowlers, because they're 18, 19, 20 years old trying to figure out how the fuck do I bowl to Sophie Devine, and then I get Sophie Devine out, and who's coming to the crease? None other than Amelia Kerr, who was 3rd in Super Smash runs. So what do you make of like just the disparity or the level of your team in the wider competition? Because we've talked about the big dogs, and it's just like there's such an establishment of big dog teams that come and go. Like Auckland Aces could have a really big dog team themselves, but Guptill, Chapman, Phillips, Ferguson hasn't played, but the others have played like 2 or 3 games that haven't been able to impact their team's performance. Like it just seems like if you don't have a team that is either always available with some high quality players, or a team that is far more experienced, you're going to struggle just with how this competition looks with such dominant teams at the top end.
Yeah, I was going to say especially in 2020, but I'm not sure if that's actually the case. It's more like 2020 is the format where you can just sort of swing the bat and get lucky one day, and it is just more volatile. The game doesn't last long enough to even out so that the better team always wins, like you get in the longer formats of stuff. I don't know. I just sort of see it as like each case is kind of a unique reflection on the region they represent, which is kind of a cool thing, I guess, for domestic cricket, because it's not always the case in other domestic sporting competitions that we have around the country, where like it can be a little bit artificial. Here you sort of like, and it's guts on Otago because they do have probably the smallest population base to choose from. They also probably have the toughest conditions for like training cricket. I would imagine it's coldest and wettest if you compare the weather. I don't know, the weather stats, if someone keeps those, I'm sure they do. Like, it's tough. It's going to be harder to develop, because it seems to me like when it comes to people talking about how do you develop young players and whatever, it seems like the best thing to do that in any sport is just to have the most players to choose from and let the cream rise to the top. If Otago don't have that, you need to start manufacturing that a bit more with some sneaky signings. I think what's tricky for them is also you get players like Jimmy Neesham went to Otago from Auckland initially, made his name, then moved to Wellington after a while, and it was at a point where he sort of needed a change in his career, so fair enough, and it's revitalized him. But I think it can be tough for Otago to maintain some of these dudes, the ones they brought up and the ones also that they brought down, and then they get to a level and then want to go back where they like living in a place where they can be around family and familiar settings or whatever, or just another challenge, or just also if you're playing for the team that is more often than not lower down the thing, you get fewer opportunities to score huge runs or take huge wickets, and then your international prospects are limited. I think we sort of talked about Jacob Duffy a little bit at the start of this season as a guy who felt like, and he's still fairly young. He is still fairly young. He's only like 26, 27, but it felt like he was a guy who'd been around a long time and had been left a little bit underrated, and maybe that's a product of playing for a team that just wasn't quite as competitive. Having said that, Otago you've seen enough from Otago sports around the traps, like they're going to punch above their weight, and there are certainly like fellas who've done extremely well this season and beyond. It's just, it feels like a reflection. Like you can't necessarily be like Otago are doing this because it's the smartest play. Well, you can say it's Otago are doing like the smartest thing they can do in their circumstances, but you can't then say like, therefore it's the smartest thing for someone else's circumstances. I think each team sort of has, in a weird way, each team kind of has their own little identity, their own little kind of bubble that is reflected by various things: the population, the conditions, the heritage of their teams, the amount of old boys that they might have to be able to call upon to boost them up and whatnot. Feels like a very Canterbury thing. You always get ex-Canterbury players championing the Canterbury region and whatnot. Fair enough too. Like they're all little, they're all little reflections, little bubbles of their own regions. I think is kind of how I feel about that.
I like everything you said is true, but it's not really like applicable. Like, because the Otago women's team has arguably like one of the like biggest chunks of young talent. The men's team produces their own players consistently. They just like filter through at different levels. So I'm not sure like that's as I just don't think that's warranted. Like the idea of like the Volts recruitment, but what about the Auckland men? Like I'm talking here about the Auckland men and the Otago women. So just how do you view their campaigns? Like you think Auckland Aces should be competing at a high level in the Super Smash. Otago women, it's clear the bulk of their team is between 17 and 25, which is fantastic for Otago cricket. It's not conducive to winning games against Sophie Devine or Amy Satterthwaite or Katie Perkins and Holly Huddleston of the Auckland Hearts. So I'm more interested in what you make of the Auckland Aces and their campaign. They've lost 6 games. They've won 7 games. They're the team who's just struggled to find that medium between having your best players available and having some pretty solid, but again, younger, not less established, just maybe slightly less talented domestic battlers or troopers who weren't able to get them enough wins so that when the Blackcaps returned, they could keep flowing. What have you made of the Auckland Aces situation?
I mean, I'd have to look at like the games played and whatnot to see like who's been around enough, but it does seem like that kind of idea that floated before about the way in which Northern Districts get maybe a little bit overrated in terms of the competition side of these things because of the players they have on their books. It just feels like that's the same thing for Auckland. Like, on paper, this is the best 2020 lot that there is. There's no squad of players who have more ability to win games of 2020 cricket than the Auckland Aces team does, but Martin Guptill's not in particularly great form. I think Mark Chapman's had some injuries. Colin Munro is currently playing in Australia rather than here, and there goes probably like the best domestic 2020 batsman in the country, arguably. Guys like Kyle Jamieson have been playing Blackcaps and then, having a little bit of a rest, as all the Blackcaps tend to do. I'm not sure how many games he's played. Lockie Ferguson has been injured. Like, that's half of, and I'm sure there's others I'm not even thinking of, but like that's half of an incredible 2020 team missing, and at that point it just becomes like, don't know how you could expect them to be competitive other than that. They have had like some good, they've had some very nice performances from, like, I think Sean Soley has scored some runs, hasn't he? Which is great because he was not scoring runs in the Plunket Shield side of cricket at the start of the season. The O'Donnell brothers have come on nicely. Like, I can't remember if Ben Horn's been chipping away, but he's definitely a player I enjoy watching, so he's got the capabilities. I don't know, I just don't... Their bowling stocks seem like the one that's the most compromised, particularly with Ferguson having had some injuries, Jamieson not having been there necessarily every game. They maybe didn't have the depth in that area, but Auckland just feels like a team who they just haven't had the soldiers in the front line, and that's just like sometimes you don't even have to look that much deeper than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's like it's a fair excuse, especially with in conjunction like similar scenario but different to the Otago Sparks. But the thing is, when I look at the Otago Sparks and I put them up against some of those Super Smash women's teams, I can see the issue and I can see how they are struggling against some of those more powerful teams. When I put Auckland up against maybe Canterbury, who are in third, there's no reason why like a Auckland team without their Blackcaps can't win 50% of their games against Canterbury without their Blackcaps. It's just it's a weird dynamic up in Auckland, but you do have Will Somerville as the best spinner in the men's Super Smash, which is good for them. So, I'm going to ask you a couple specific questions here, Wildcard, just to catch your vibe on how you're feeling. Just let's roll through these semi-rapidly. Don't think too deeply. Just give me the first kind of thoughts that come to your head. And first, I want to know a bit more about how you feel about Finn Allen and whether you, do you think that he is someone who could push for Blackcaps selection fairly soon? Or is this just like a emerging stage of Finn Allen's batsmanship with the Wellington Firebirds? Because in the other formats this summer he has struggled, but he is doing some pretty bonkers things in the Super Smash.
He certainly is. I mean, he, at the extreme level of those two things as well. Like, he wasn't just struggling, he was straight up awful for a lot of Plunket Shield stuff. I think he was out of the team for large portions of the season because he just wasn't delivering, and then all of a sudden the Super Smash comes along and he's outrageous. Like he's piling boundaries on every which way you can look. Like I mean, it's very sudden that it's happened, but it's also, this is a dude who has been highly touted for a couple of years. I think him and Rachi Ravindra were like the stars of that of their under-19 wave. From memory, I'm pretty sure. Like, Rachi Ravindra is a guy who's been given a lot of opportunities to play himself through some of his like early career kind of, it's not even struggles, it's just like settling into this level of cricket. He's been given opportunities to play through that. He's played New Zealand A stuff. Finn Allen has too. I mean, Finn Allen scored 100 against England, didn't he, in a New Zealand A game? It was one of those unofficial ones rather than a first class level one, but still, that's against England's Test bowling attack, whether they're a bit jet lagged still at the point or not. Good runs, right? And I think you got to give him a couple more years to sort of like level this out. And like, he hasn't overtaken Ravindra, for example, in the Blackcaps kind of like the Blackcaps Selector secret list. If I like chuck that image up there.
Only T20 cricket here though, Wildcard. Only T20 cricket we're talking about.
Which is the one where it's most likely to, like, someone like him is most likely to be selected. Obviously, he's not going to walk into the test team, or like no one walks into the test team, but 2020 they will take a bolter selection now and then. So it's possible. Yeah, you're right. Like, it's possible. I think there are other people still in front of him in that queue. I think you're still struggling to fit in guys like, I mean, Ross Taylor didn't even make the most recent squad, did he? So I'd say he's got to do it in another
I'll
season.
roll through that. So Finn Allen is part of a batting group that has Colin Munro scoring runs in the Big Bash League. You've got Daryl Mitchell is 6th in total runs, 34 average, 133 strike rate, which is pretty decent. Devon Conway is a factor. Will Young has been pretty solid with the CD Stags. He's averaging 45 with a strike rate of 163. Doug Bracewell's doing some slugger things down the low order. So the only thing here, Wildcard, that is working in Finn Allen or any of these batsmen, right? Like, because they're all competing for the same spot. Like, whether it's Tim Seifert looking to double down on his Blackcaps T20 role, whether it's Will Young trying to be a factor in T20 cricket, any of these batsmen, because it's pretty cluttered there, the thing that is working in their favour is that Martin Guptill's struggling. So if Martin Guptill continues to struggle, he's only played 3 games in the Super Smash, 44 runs at a strike rate of 100, but he has struggled pretty much all summer, low-key, under the radar. The only way I can see like something funky happening to the Blackcaps T20 team is if they do make a brave decision to, go without Martin Guptill, and you labelled Colin Munro's Big Bash League form as irrelevant. That might, if there's no Guptill and there's no Munro, that's when you're going to be looking at some of these other players. But like, it's a pretty cluttered group of batsmen. Ross Taylor's been there as well. Like, these are all dudes who Tom Blundell might be a T20 guy. Like, we can't rule him out. Mark Chapman will want to play T20 cricket. Like, there's plenty of batting around. And then we look at the leading wicket takers. These are the 4 best bowlers of the Super Smash so far. In order: Blair Tickner, Scott Kugelheim, Matt Henry, Hamish Bennett. These are all pretty similar seamers. And they're all in a pretty similar spot when it comes to Blackcaps T20 cricket, because they're all outside the first 11 in my mind. But they're all, like, any number of those 4 players could be selected in a Blackcaps T20 squad. If I was going to say you needed one of those bowlers in your first 11, Blair Tickner, Scott Kugelheim, Matt Henry, or Hamish Bennett, who are you selecting out of those 4 seam bowlers as a player that you are selecting in your first 11 if you can only select one of that group of 4?
Can I cheat and pick Doug Bracewell as option E instead?
He's in a different category.
Right. Because I would otherwise take Doug Bracewell. If he is unavailable, then who do we have? Tickner, Kugelheim, Henry, and Bennett. I would say. I mean, all four of them have had Blackcaps opportunities in 2020 cricket within the last 12 months. I think. Certainly within the last I don't know when Matt Henry last played, but I don't know, because I think I probably would lean towards Matt Henry, actually.
Matt Henry has not played since January 2017.
Right. Well, I think I might lean towards him, because he is a very good ODI bowler. And he can swing the bat a little bit. Kugelheim's probably the guy who has the stats on the board, the standings in that secret selectors list I mentioned. It's probably him who would actually get the thing. I would tend towards Matt Henry, though. Just to check, because as you say, I don't think any of these guys would be in the first 11, and I think there are 5 or 6 bowlers who would probably be ahead of them on the depth chart. But I mean, bowlers get injured; that happens. It'd be an interesting one. What I would actually do if I was in a legit scenario of having some kind of influence over this is I'd call all 4 of them into a camp. Would go to the next session, and I'd say, who can hit a Yorker 6 times in a row, you get in. Whichever one of you can bowl in a way which suits the last over of a 2020 game, you get selected. Whoever can not be smashed in that situation, whoever can maybe hit the stumps a couple times, take a wicket in that situation, that's what we need. Because I don't know, that just feels like it doesn't even just feel like it. That is the one thing that is overwhelmingly, the biggest weakness of probably all Kiwi limited overs international cricket, is I don't know who's bowling a death over and doing very well at it. So I think, hypothetically speaking, just to stretch it out, that's what I'd do. I'd have a training camp with all 4 of them. Whoever can succeed in this scenario the best, you get the nod.
You'd probably need to do some, as they call it, range hitting as well, just to find out, just to factor in, okay, this dude performed well in the Yorker test, but he was terrible at hitting boundaries and rotating the strike. So we'll weigh that up against this dude who was less impressive in hitting the Yorkers, but he was still solid, and he also cracked boundaries everywhere. Because we have this joke about bowlers being selected for what they do with the bat in various Blackcaps cricket, but watching a lot of T20 cricket at the moment, I'm always fascinated at the responsibility that falls to the bowlers. It's the bowlers who have to try and win a game with their bowling, and then it's the bowlers who have to try and win a game with their batting, because they're the dudes batting down the order, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th over, and it's surely just fucking put a batsman way down the order just to finish the innings. I don't know. That's a bit crazy, but
I don't think it's that crazy. That's the floater closer is an idea I've that's nagged away at me for a while now. Just have a guy who ostensibly is number 6, but you're going to bring them in the last 4 or 5 overs and say it's your job either to get us an extra 20 runs at the end of the first innings or to take us over the line at the end of the second innings. That's your job, whoever it is. Someone like a Jimmy Neesham seems like a good option for the actual for the Blackcaps side. I don't think that's I think 2020 is so ripe for the picking when it comes to out of the box selections and tactics. I just would like to see more of it,
For sure. I'm just amazed that they place such an importance on these games and winning T20 games, and then some tail ender has to come out and fucking hit 18 off the last over. Surely you can do better than putting the tail end out. I don't know. But that plays into the next category wildcard. And you mentioned Jimmy Neesham. Jimmy Neesham's been fantastic with the ball before he mangled his finger. He was taking 8 wickets and an average of 16, 6.9 RPO, strike rate of 14, which is pretty impressive. Jimmy Neesham's bowling strike rate was better than Bennett's, Henrys, and Kugelines. So shout out to Jimmy Neesham, and of course we know how he bats. So flowing on from that, we have Jimmy Neesham, we have Daryl Mitchell, we have Doug Bracewell. Give people a quick update on Dougie Bracewell here. He is 10 wickets at a strike rate of 16.8, and he's also, I wrote this morning that he has the highest strike rate of batsmen with over 100 runs. So he just surpassed Finn Allen, because Finn Allen had a couple quiet days there, and so Dougie Bracewell's strike rate of 191.35, boosted perhaps by playing at Pukekura Park, but he is scoring runs. He has had 5 not outs in his 8 innings, so he's finishing these innings off, and let me just pull up his record here. In his last 4 games wildcard, he has taken 8 wickets, and in all 4 of those games, he has been not out at the end of an innings. Nice little patch of form there for Doug Bracewell. I'm going to chuck Mitchell Santner into this category as well, because he bowls and he bats pretty equally as well as each other. How would you kind of build your team with those 4 players? I'm not going to make you select one of those players, but like, who would you put where? How would you, like, would all of them make a possible first 11? Like, how would you just, like, kind of, who would miss out? Where would they be? That kind of discussion with Daryl Mitchell, Doug Bracewell, Jimmy Neesham, and Mitchell Santner.
Yeah, I mean, could you pick I don't know if you'd pick some of those dudes as frontline bowlers. Bracewell might be the only, Santner obviously is in there as a spinner. I think he's, without doubt, like the Blackcaps 2020 team for the last 4 or 5 years has always been, when it's possible to do so, with 1 or 2 exceptions, but not very many of them. Like 90% of the time they've picked 2 spinners. It's been Ish Sodhi and it's been Mitchell Santner. Mitchell Santner also, like, yeah, like, I was going to say, I almost said underrated as a lower order batsman, but he's actually been overrated as a lower order batsman for most of his career. But underrated as a power hitter, I think maybe is a better way to put that. He can hit a pretty mean 6. He's definitely in there. I'm probably...
So if you've got Santner's the number 1 spinner, and he's batting
8, maybe?
Would you put Santner way down the order? 7, 8, 9?
I wouldn't have him any higher than 7 for sure.
Yeah, so Santner's there, and now we're looking at maybe 1 or 2 seeming all-rounders. So are you going to go with 1? Are you going to go with 2? Who would they be?
If I'm going with 1, it would be Jimmy Neesham. If I'm going with 2, I would have Neesham and also Bracewell, probably. I think Daryl Mitchell is an extremely useful 2020 player. I just think he is too similar to Jimmy Neesham. And in that case, I don't know you can pick both. And I think we have actually seen a bit of this in recent times with the Blackcaps, where, like, it's one or the other, in the same way that Mitchell and Colin de Gronholm have been, like, only one of them is going to play in the test team, and de Gronholm seems to have been the preferred option, which is fair enough. It's actually, like, de Gronholm's batting stats over the last couple of years in test cricket are off the charts. Like, nobody would necessarily expect that of a guy who everyone thinks is like Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky kind of batsman, you know, easy come, easy go kind of thing. He's actually scored, like, he's got a test 100. He's also scored a number of pretty useful 50s at a very high strike rate of 80 odd or something like that over the last couple of years. And he's kind of alternated with Daryl Mitchell when he's been unavailable. Mitchell comes in straight swap. I think that's kind of how Neesham and Mitchell are being used in the 2020 stuff as well. I think that's probably fair enough too. If I was picking an overall first 11, I think it would have Santner and Neesham both. I don't think it would have Doug Bracewell, but I would want him in my squad, particularly in his current form.
Yes, definitely. I'm gonna chuck Kane Williamson's definitely there. I'm gonna we're friendly to Ross Taylor. Ross Taylor has scored 60 runs at a strike rate of 162. I think he did play 2 of his 3 games at Pokekura Park, which is about as divine as Ross Taylor's cricketing locations get. If you've got Kane and Taylor, which I think we're both agreeing, especially with the discussion we've had about finishing innings and what Taylor does really well as a T20 international batsman. We've talked a lot about this. His skill set, I think we both believe, is nicely suited to a middle order role for the Blackcaps. If we've got Kane and Taylor, I wrote down 6 other batsmen. I'm not sure if I missed anyone here. I've got Mark Chapman, Glenn Phillips, Devon Conway, Colin Munro, Tim Seifert, and Martin Guptill. If you could select, maybe we'll go with 3 of that group of 6. I'll repeat it. Mark Chapman, Glenn Phillips, Devon Conway, Colin Munro, Tim Seifert, Martin Guptill. Who are you selecting from that group?
Well, someone has to wicket keep, and I think that's probably going to be Tim Seifert. And if Tim Seifert's in the team, it seems he is going to be an opener. Glenn Phillips is for sure going to be in my first choice 2020 team. I could go either way on a few of those other ones. What was the 6 again? Was Chapman?
So left you've got Chapman, Conway, Munro, and Guptill. Don't worry about like order batting position. I just want to know the 3 from that group.
Oh man, a lot of it depends on something you hinted at earlier, which is like, is Martin Guptill actually vulnerable for a spot? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say Martin Guptill's been through plenty of these. He is a peaks and a valley kind of batsman. We've seen drops in form followed by incredible untouchable form afterwards. So I'm riding with Martin Guptill. Remember, he's also the best fielder in the squad, probably a factor to be considered as well. If I'm ignoring the wicketkeeper thing, I would still go Guptill, Phillips, and Conway from those 3. You might, I suppose I could just say Conway can keep or something like that. I don't know. As far as pure batsmen go, those would be the 3 I'd pick. Having said that, I think Tim Seifert is a locked-on first choice for the Blackcaps at the moment. So, from a selector's point of view, so what I say doesn't necessarily matter. In fact, scratch the necessarily from that.
So what's funny about that is you've got Kane Williamson, Ross Taylor, Glenn Phillips, and Tim Seifert. They're all right-handers.
That's a fair point.
And then I'm not in the sense of building a team. It's just when you're like thinking through it. And then Martin Guptill's the only remaining right-hander. I think we both agree maybe Chapman is the lowest rank of that group of 6. So then it's like Munro and Conway. Even Munro, Conway, and Guptill gets a bit crazy. Like, trying to choose between those 3 is pretty intense. But that's kind of where other names come into the mix. Like, obviously, you get into the all-rounders, so you start seeing Jimmy Neesham. You mentioned Colin de Grandhomme. Will be interesting to see how he moves and grooves through this remaining period of games. We also... Have you seen much of the women's Super Smash wildcard? And is there anyone you didn't know of before who you've been like, she is someone? Maybe not someone who will be a superstar White Ferns player this summer, because they've got a series against England locked in and maybe a series against Australia. Basically anyone except for Sophie Devine, because she's so astronomically amazing with what she's doing. She was amazing in the Women's Big Bash League. Let's just throw that up. And then she's come straight into Super Smash and just repeated the dose. It's pretty crazy.
I don't know. I've watched a fair bit of it. I don't think I've watched enough to be able to say like someone unexpected has caught my eye with their performances. Anyone
except for Sophie Devine. Is there anyone except for Sophie Devine who is catching your eye?
Well, what seems to be like it does seem like the performances of coming in ranked based on like previous expectations of what they would be. Like Sophie Devine's been incredible, and then like next up, who's the next most important players for the White Ferns? Like, oh, here we go. Amy Satterthwaite is top in runs. Amelia Kerr is third in runs. You know, that kind of thing. I will say, has Frankie Mackay always been like a strike bowler? And I think who was the other? Maddie Green as well. Has taken wickets, bowling a few like little offies and stuff. It seems like that's been a I don't know. Frankie Mackay might have always been a lead wicket taker type, but it does feel like maybe we're seeing like either players like working on their aspect of their game a lot, or maybe it's like just similar to what we saw in the Plunket Shield last season, where like part-time bowlers, if you can do a little bit of a job, you can take good wickets. I mean, Michael Brace, I'm just looking at the like scrolling down the most wickets thing on the thing, and opposite that is best bowling. I don't know the name. Zara Jetley, who's got the best bowling figures for who's that? That's for Wellington, isn't it? The best in the women's Super Smash with a 4 for 9, tied with Maddie Green actually. But like Michael Bracewell is second for the men. He's another one of those types who's like definitely not a frontline bowler, but someone who's getting overs every game, doing a tidy job. I don't know. Yeah, there's probably a couple of things in that I said that you might be able to pick up on though. Tell me about Tamsin Newton as well. Is Tamsin Newton someone who's right on the White Ferns radar?
She was. She played for the Perth Scorchers in the Women's Big Bash League a couple of years ago. And then she fell off the radar a bit.
Right.
She made her T20 debut in 2015 for New Zealand. She played for Wellington Rugby last winter during the lockdown, which was pretty cool. She's someone on the wider extremities. Anna Pedersen is the player to probably keep an eye on the as we move towards the crux of the Super Smash, just because she wasn't in Australia. With the White Ferns, their T20 International Series against Australia in Australia late last year, where I think Australia won most of those games. Anna Pedersen is a spinner, but she hasn't been too great with the ball. She's only taken 2 wickets at a strike rate of 45, but she does. I'm all about women's strike rates because you can tell a lot just like, you know, how ruthless they are in hitting boundaries. And Anna Pedersen has a strike rate of 143. She's a very good, she's a White Ferns all-rounder. She can bowl spin. She bats pretty well. Wasn't in the last series, and I'd chuck her up as someone to keep an eye on for Auckland, especially as Auckland are third in the Women's Super Smash, and they'll need to do something pretty crazy. If they're going to win the Super Smash, they need Anna Pedersen. Lee Kasparek is second in wickets, and she didn't play in Australia as well. She was stuck in Scotland, basically up until the start of the Super Smash, kinda. And she has returned to the Super Smash, and she has 12 wickets and an average of 9, RPO of 5, strike rate of 9.6. So she is performing at an exceptionally high level. And if you've got Lee Kasparek for the White Ferns, it makes things tougher to select Frances Mackay. Frances Mackay has had a weird relationship with the White Ferns, we don't know what's doing there, but she's been kind of in then out while being a dominant force across New Zealand cricket, multi-formats. But the White Ferns have a lot of spinners as well. You've got Lee Kasparek, you've got Amelia Kerr, you've got Anna Pedersen, as well as Frances Mackay. So they're pretty stocked for spin bowlers, and then as you mentioned, players like Maddie Green rolling the arm over as well, which is pretty notable. There are some weird things happening just with a couple. We'll finish here because I am interested just to see how the White Ferns squad shapes out, because there's weird stuff like Rosemary Mayer, who played in the Women's Big Bash League. She was pretty impressive for the Melbourne Renegades, same team as Amy Satterthwaite, Leah Tahuhu. She has played 4 games with 1 wicket. She's like a White Ferns WBBL seamer. And then she comes down to the Super Smash and hasn't been able to do too much. And her Central District's comrade, Hannah Rowe, another seamer, she has 4 wickets at an average of 43, and they've been in a lot of White Ferns squads recently. So I'm interested to see what happens there. The White Ferns have a lot of spinners, high quality spinners, and we've also seen Jess Kerr emerge as a seam bowler. So the White Ferns could have a seam attack of Jess Kerr, Leah Tahuhu, Holly Huddleston's been pretty good in the Super Smash, and then a couple of those other seamers drop out. Like, I think this is a key moment for the White Ferns where they can select just the best players. Because I think what has happened with the White Ferns a wee bit is that there are players who have just been selected because there isn't much competition for places. And that was maybe the case a few years ago, like when Tamsin Newton fell out of favour with the White Ferns. Like, I don't know why she fell out of favour, but that's when the likes of Hannah Rowe are emerging. That's when Rosemary Mayer is emerging. That's around about the time when Holly Huddleston is starting to play international cricket. Now, I think, is another little junction where the White Ferns can really focus on who are the best players in the Super Smash, and that automatically means that you're selecting the bulk of the White Ferns anyway, because they are doing pretty well in the Super Smash. But there are a couple tweaks that could be made where you're selecting like Jess Kerr and Holly Huddleston over Hannah Rowe and Rosemary Mayer. And like selections like that, or just like who are the most brutal women's batters. It's harder with the women, but you might select Amelia Kerr to bat her up the order, and then you might not see so much of Lauren Down, who has played a lot of White Ferns cricket without doing too much. So I think this is a really interesting moment where you can just say who are the best 12 to 13 T20 players in the Women's Super Smash. In correlation with the White Ferns, select them for the White Ferns, as opposed to these are the players who have been in the White Ferns for a long time without doing too much, but they're going to be selected again just because they've been there before.
Yeah, particularly with a couple different contexts, because they've got, I think the England team is, if they're not already here, then they're on their way. They're coming for, 3 2020s and 3 ODIs, I think, and a couple tour matches as well. Australia's meant to be coming here for, I think 3 2020s as well. I can't remember that one off the top of the head, but they've got games against 2 very good teams, and it has been the case for the White Ferns where they have been the kind of team who can beat all the teams ranked below them and has been struggling immensely against the teams ranked above them. A chance to play against 2 of those better teams, in particular, I don't even know if it's in particular. I was going to say in particular Australia because they're the standard bearers. Maybe in particular England because just playing them in New Zealand might be balancing the ledgers just enough. Either way, just play better and win games. They've got the talent, they've got the ability to do that, just haven't quite been able to deliver against the better teams over the last couple of years. This is a summer which is going to give them an opportunity to play some of those teams and test themselves, see where we're really at, that kind of thing. And then also the other context, of course, is it's not 2020, but the ODI World Cup is coming up. We are hosting that. There is expectations on host nations to do fairly well. Plus it's just an opportunity to do even better in your own conditions. Couple reasons there why the next 12 months are pretty huge for the White Ferns. So all this information that we can get, which is basically what we're talking about when it comes to scouting out the state of the squad moving forward, judging these performances within that context, the more information we can get in order to fill out those two like expectations of doing well in these upcoming games this summer and being extremely competitive, challenging for the World Cup when we host it coming up. I mean, that was supposed to be now, wasn't it? But it obviously got pushed back. Like, the more information, the better, basically.
Damn sure, Webby Wildcard. We'll wrap it up there. It is the Super Smash Extravaganza. There's plenty of Super Smash notes that you can read about if you want further information. Otherwise, we will be back next week with another episode of the Niche Case Variety Show, running across all different matters of Aotearoa sport, and then we'll see what is on the agenda for another episode of the Niche Cast later in the week. Kia kaha, stay beautiful, and then just a bit of chur.